Hello and welcome back to the Mindsets podcast and a happy new year. It is 2025, a great year hopefully for both of us, you as a listener, me as a podcast host. And let's get into this episode because this episode, my guest is you. I am doing a solo episode today. It's the first one I've done since the very first episode where I was explaining what on earth I was doing with a microphone in front of my face. Now, one thing that I want to talk about is what happened last year. And another thing that I want to talk about is what's going to go ahead and happen this year for the podcast. Firstly, I want to say a massive thank you for listening, not just to this episode, but hopefully to the other episodes you might have listened to in the past. And if you haven't, great opportunity, go back and listen to some really cool conversations that I've had. Because the support that has been shown last year really enabled me to carry on doing the podcast. At times, it became very, very difficult to juggle a lot of things. And if I'm honest, I really did think about stopping the podcast at certain points. But seeing the value that was provided to you guys as listeners and how much some of the guests actually enjoyed doing the podcast really made me realize I should be doing this more. And that's why we are continuing. Now, I want to talk about 2024. 2024, on the face of it, was actually a complete failure for the podcast. And hear me out. At the beginning of last year, I decided to write down a bunch of goals. It's what I saw everyone was doing on my social media. It's something that I hadn't done before. And I thought this is absolutely what I should be doing. And in reality, I think I only hit 2 of the 5 goals that I actually wrote down. I didn't hit the number of episodes I wanted to hit. I didn't therefore meet the number of guests that I wanted to meet. I wasn't able to earn as much as I wanted to off the podcast by the end of the year. And I wasn't able to therefore invest as much money as I wanted to into the podcast by the end of the year. There's a few other things that didn't happen along the way, but I'm not going to get into those because I want to immediately start to put a positive spin on things. While I didn't achieve certain things last year, the podcast is now sat at 1,100 and something followers, which, and bear in mind, that is on Instagram. If we're talking about all different platforms, then it's even higher than that. But I keep coming back to the fact that if there were that many people in a room listening to me right now, I don't think you guys can understand how nervous I would be. So that is huge and cannot be understated, and in reality makes 2024 look like a massive success because a year ago, I think the podcast was sat at around 300 followers. So we're nearly 4 times that, which means for every one of you listening, you've now got 3 mates along with you. As well as that, some of the people that I met last year and some of the stories that we got to hear, some of the different sports that we learnt about was amazing. I had never really thought about doing episodes with people in certain situations like disabled rowing or taking performance enhancing drugs to be on stage for bodybuilding or doing crazy ultra marathons back to back, doing Ironmans 32 days in a row, and some other absolutely ridiculous stories from the military and all these sorts of things. As well as getting some advice from people that work within the sports space, whether that's nutritionists or actually coaches for women. I find the whole understanding of training for women deeply interesting because I'm a guy. There's certain things that I never have to consider in the way that I train, but there's amazing things that I learn and now appreciate for 50% of the population that are training alongside me. Now, because of 2024 being the way that it was for me in my personal life, it meant that the podcast took a hit, which is something that I do regret. And I want to, again, thank you for holding on and bearing with me. For those that don't know, my background is actually engineering. I have a master's in aerospace engineering from Loughborough University. And when I actually started the podcast, I worked at Rolls-Royce. And the reason I started the podcast was a couple of things on a personal level where I was interested in the sort of mental and physical impact of life on each other. But at the same time, I had this itch that I couldn't scratch now that I'd left university. For those of you that don't know, I'm not sure where you're listening from, but Loughborough University is renowned for its sport. And I went and did my engineering degree there as kind of a chance for me to still do sport at a high level and explore sport whilst also studying for my degree. The thing was, once I left the university, I kind of lost the sports side and I changed sports. I wasn't really sure what I was doing. I found myself in the gym, kind of just following a program for the sake of it, no intention of doing any bodybuilding, but I was doing some sort of bodybuilding split. It was all a bit bizarre. And so the itch that I needed to scratch was in the sports space. And the podcast to begin with gave me this ability to talk to athletes and learn from them, find out about their lives, being athletes, what that must be like. And it was okay for a while. But as you guys can probably tell now, it wasn't enough. And last year, I made the decision to walk away from engineering. It wasn't the smart move, according to my parents and to some friends, especially because engineering is so financially stable and you can do so many cool things, but it really wasn't giving me what I wanted. And I wasn't willing to sit behind a desk and stare at a computer screen doing something I didn't want to do for the rest of my life just because it made sense. So I took the bold move and I left. I tried to get into the sports space in a normal career to kind of, again, try and scratch the itch whilst doing the podcast and meeting people, that sort of thing. But it was harder than I thought it would be, to be honest. And what I ended up discovering was that maybe I should back myself and work for myself, which is something I've always wanted to do anyway. But I kind of came around sooner than I thought it would. So what does that mean for me personally? Well, I now work a camera for a living. So I film people at sporting events. Most recently, I've obviously been doing High Rocks myself, and High Rocks is a fantastic opportunity to film great athletes doing their thing and making them look quick. But that doesn't mean to say that I absolutely can't work with people in a normal gym space or actually just doing sort of documentary filming or things like the podcast itself. So I got into that, which was a huge personal investment, both in time and financially. And that is where the podcast took a bit of a hit, which I hadn't been able to plan for at the beginning of the year because I didn't know that I was going to make the leap halfway through the year. Now, that's kind of what's gone on behind the scenes. And that is me trying to justify why I wasn't able to get as many episodes out towards the end of the year. In fact, I wanted to have an episode every single week for the entire year, and I didn't get even close to that. However, again, kind of justifying it, I think of the 40 episodes that went out last year, I knew maybe 6 of the people before 2024, which means that around 34 people I met in 2024, managed to get them on the podcast and get a great episode in. It's also worth saying that for every episode that did come out, there was probably about 2 to 3 planned that actually fell through. And that is the nature of doing this whole thing by myself as well. Not complaining. I've absolutely loved the process of doing it all by myself. It's taught me so much and I've met so many incredible people, but it is incredibly stressful trying to juggle all of these people coming over to do a podcast and convincing them that it's a good idea while they've got incredibly busy lives themselves and trying to make all the stars align to get a great episode in. But what hasn't changed is you guys. In fact, while there's more of you, there's a lot of you that are the same in your interests, in giving me great questions to ask guests and making the episodes so worth doing. So I want to give back to you. So let's talk about 2025. 2025, the podcast is going to look different. There will be less episodes. That means that hopefully the quality of the episodes can go up. The next thing is that the guest episodes are actually going to reduce. And no, that does not mean you will be getting more of these episodes of me rambling on about what's to come, what's happened, everything like that. But I'm actually going to have a co-host for a lot of the episodes in 2025. And the co-host and I will be going through all sorts of different performance-related topics. Now, that means that within your given sport, if there is something you wish you knew more about or you want to understand more about, whether that is scientifically or whether that is anecdotally, then this is the opportunity for you to continue being involved in driving the podcast. So reach out. There'll be opportunities for you to ask questions about certain topics that we'll cover. But the main aim is to start giving back to you guys as listeners ways to understand the way that you train and push yourself to a higher limit. Now, that might mean you're getting into a new sport. Maybe you're getting into the gym for the very first time. What's really the best way of doing it? Or what are some standard approaches you could take? And what are the little nuances within these different ways of training or ways to approach your competition or ways of thinking that could really help you get the most out of your performance? That's the aim of that. Now, within those episodes, they're not going to be deeply serious. There is going to be a few games, a few quizzes, these sorts of things that we can do to make it more entertaining. I'm really, really looking forward to those episodes. And as a bit of announcement, the co-host that I will be moving forward with is a man called Charles Ingell. In fact, he has been a guest on the podcast last year. He's one of the best coaches I have ever met in person, both for his dedication to understanding sport, but his ability to cater his understanding and teach to those from many, many different backgrounds across many, many different sports. That is why I think those episodes are going to be fantastic. Is we are not just going to be talking about things in a high rocks sense because I do high rocks. We're going to be doing this for all different sports, whether you row on a Sunday and you play squash on a Monday and then you do ice hockey on a Friday. There should be things that you can take from all of our conversations that apply to all of those different sports. So that's the first announcement. The next announcement is that the venue is changing for the most part. So for those that don't know, a lot of the podcasts have actually been filmed in my house, in the spare bedroom, which has been absolutely fantastic that I've had the space to do so. However, it has been an absolute nightmare for moving things around because, believe it or not, this room does not permanently live as a podcast studio. However, some episodes will still be here, but the new location is actually in central London. I have got access to a new recording studio, which means that it's easier for guests to get here, which might mean that we can get some of those guests that couldn't make it last year onto the podcast next year. And we can also push the production quality. It's something that I really tried to do last year, but found it very difficult while I'm in a house to sort of decorate, make it look more like it's the Mindsets podcast, or even add some cool things to look at while you're watching on YouTube. But we'll be able to do that from now on and going forward. So that's another exciting thing. I think one of the other targets that I may have mentioned briefly last year was that the podcast financially has always been done by, well, it's been propped up by me as a result of, editing, producing, planning, filming. All of this has been done purely by me because it's my own venture. I'm the only person investing in it. And I really, really wanted to have the opportunity to work with a podcast sponsor to enable me to maybe travel to different guests and get some different episodes in where it's difficult for them to come to me because of their training schedules or just, how busy they are. But I was unable to make that happen. I think part of that is due to the consistency towards the end of the year. But part of it is also that podcasting is an incredibly, incredibly competitive space. And it's also difficult for some brands to work with podcasts because there isn't that much feedback on engagement. That being said, the engagement on the social media has been incredible. The trailers have been doing fantastically. Even the short clips have been doing really, really well above expectation, which I'm really proud of. So thank you for the support on those. And what it's meant is that there are opportunities going into this year to work with some cool brands at some events or actually get them involved in the podcast episodes. One of those opportunities is actually tied to Charles, and we'll discuss that more in the next episode that comes out. But we will be moving forward. We will be working with a particular brand, a particular company that I think provides really good value to you as a listener, but will also provide good value to the podcast with what they do. So that's another exciting announcement. I think the thing that I said first is changing is the number of episodes, which I do want to circle back to because I'm trying to make it not sound like it's a negative thing, but we will be dropping it to one every other week. Part of the reason is because I'm still just as busy as I was at the end of last year, which makes churning out episodes, recording that many episodes, and networking that much a little bit more difficult. But it also means that the quality can go up. And the other thing with the episodes with Charles is they're slightly more consistent, which again just means the quality can go up. We're giving you guys more of what you want. And it means that when we do get guests on, those conversations can be fantastic and we can cover all bases, as well as tying some of those topics that we talk about in our performance conversations with Charles into those guest episodes, so we can ask more directed questions towards the guest about the way that they train or the things that they've overcome and kind of how they've done that. So that's the plan for 2025. And I keep thanking you for being here. I will continue to do so. It is wild to me that there is that many of you listening. And if you're still here in the episode, then even more wild that you've made it through a solo episode where I ramble on about the year. I just want to say that I'm incredibly proud of what has been built and what you've become a part of, and I don't want to let it fade. It's very, very easy in today's world of social media to kind of start an account and leave it alone and forget about it. And that's something that I don't want to do. The audience has been cultivated. You're a great audience. I would have paid a lot of money a year ago to have all of you here. Unfortunately, you've all just invested in me by pressing that follow button. So one thing that I can request or I can try to ask of you is, if you haven't already, if you can leave a review, ideally 5 stars on the streaming platform you use, leave like, subscribe, follow on the social media, and continue to like and share anytime you enjoy one of the posts, or even just tag the podcast when you're listening, whether you're listening to this episode while you're out on a walk or while you should be working. Drop it on your Instagram story and tag us. I would love to share it and show some love back your way. 2025, I think, is going to dwarf 2024 for the podcast, both in what it offers you and the way that it grows, which is incredibly exciting. So before all of that happens, and before the movie officially starts for 2025, I just want to say one last time, thank you for listening. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. With